I've been on a serious Liz Gilbert. I have another quote in here to share with you. I don't know what's coming up for me lately with her, but I keep finding her everywhere I go and in everything I do on Facebook and all throughout my spiritual stuff. I just keep coming up against her. I guess partly it's because I've seen her in these last few years come out and be open about who she is in a way that she didn't care if she lost. You know, Doris and I were talking last night. I mean, most of her original fans from Eat, Pray, Love were probably a lot of like Midwestern or upstate Connecticut moms who, you know, were like, I want to go to Italy and have an awakening, or, you know, to India and have an awakening. And that probably put a lot of pressure on them to shift their beliefs and change as she came out and told her story about her partner who has now since died. And so that's just really affected me. I'll get back into that a little bit later. So I wanted to ask this question of you guys. Do you ever feel like your relationship with God is like a cat and mouse game or a hide and go seek game? In all honesty, anybody? You can raise your hand. It's okay to participate. Steve's even here. So I'm going to take Steve up. I'm going to be a little Steve today, so you're going to have to interact with me and play, or I'll get Steve to come up here also. We'll tag team. I'll just tag you. So I was out on the front porch the other night, and it was cooling off. It was the night before the storms came, and I was just kind of sitting there in this contemplative space of, you know, God, where are you in all this? You know, there's kids sitting in cages, 2,000 kids taken away from their parents. There is all this hatred spreading, and it seems like it's getting worse. And the internet is just like viral with all of it. And I have to put my phone down some days and step away and do some self-care. And I sat there on the porch and I was like, you know, where are you, God? Like, where are you in this? Why don't you just walk up my front porch and sit down here next to me and have a conversation? You did it before. Why can't you just show up here and sit down on my porch? And I sat there for a few minutes, and then there was like some sound over it. I was like, she scared me, you know? And then I'm like realizing that would scare the crap out of us. If Jesus or Buddha or God just came walking up onto our porch and sat down next to us, are any of us really ready for that kind of encounter? Lark is like, yes. Lark's always ready. Lark was born ready. So I thought about that a little more, and then I kind of closed my eyes and I sat there in meditation a little bit, and I realized that like part of the problem with that is that we're seeking for something outside of ourselves. Like we're seeking this God that's this guy with a beard, or this God that looks like a big fat Buddha guy, or whoever it is, to come and sit down next to us and tell us like it's going to be okay and this is all right where we are. But that's inside of us. All of this is inside of us, but we keep seeking and seeking. And I thought about a lot of the verses in the Bible about seek first, seek me and you will find me. And I think the problem is we missed the part where the seeking was about seeking to remember that the stuff was inside of us, and that God was inside of us, and that connection was inside of us. The other thing that really struck me about this, I heard this line on it was a TV show or a movie I was watching the other day, and the guy was talking to a priest, and the guy had lost his eyesight, and all this terrible stuff had happened to him, and the other guy was just like, I don't know how you keep your faith and all this stuff, and he said to him, God wants us to doubt. And the other guy looked at him kind of like, what? Like, why? And he said, because that's where our faith grows. And I really thought that was amazing, because it's so true. If we didn't have doubts, if we didn't have questions, we wouldn't push further. We wouldn't go beyond ourselves. We would just stay in this little space that we are. Just like Liz Gilbert was saying, we just stay where we are in this comfortable space, and we won't go beyond ourselves. So where is that God? Where is that God that we want to be sitting there on the front steps with us? He's right within all of us, within earshot of every one of us. Because all we have to do is go inside of ourselves, go into meditation, go into prayer, go to texts that mean something to us, that speak to us, whether it's the Bible or poetry or whatever things. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to bring to you today. One of the gifts that I really received from seminary this year was that every month we picked a different religion to study. And so all 9 months we studied a different religion. And not only did we study the religion, but we actually had to take on the practices of that religion. So they'd give us a handful. So this month is, say, Judaism, and they would give you 5 or 10 pages of some different prayers or different traditional Judaism, you know, my brain isn't even working. Like prayers, whatever the things are that normally you would do if you were Jewish. And then you had to pick one of those things. And for the 30 days of the month, you had to try to really actually take that on and do that yourself. And it was fascinating to me. And what I found was that was a form of creativity. Like I think a lot of times we get really stuck in these ideas of like, okay, I'm just gonna, pray every day, and that's like my commitment to the divine, and that's my discipline. And that's what I'll do. Every day I'll spend 10 minutes in the morning, or I'll spend 10 minutes meditating in the morning. And we all get stuck in these ruts of these things. This is what I'll do, and I'm gonna do it every day. And then sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. And then we get to a place where, I found a lot of times with my depression, I've talked about that before here, that I've struggled with depression a lot of my life off and on. And what I found was eventually the things that used to work don't work anymore. And I couldn't figure out why. I would go back and do the same thing. Okay, this got me out of my depression last time. And I would do the exact same thing. And I was still depressed. And I was like, damn it, what is happening? Why isn't this working? And I think it's for that same reason. We can't just keep repeating the same things over and over, expecting different results. As Einstein said, I think that's insanity. So I thought about that a lot, and what I wanted to share with you a little bit today was some different practices that you all could take with you that could give you some creative fire, some creative force to add to the practices that you already had. And not to say that you can't continue doing the things that you're doing, but I spent 4 years doing shamanic practices every day. I would do a journey, I would do this and that, and over time it got to be dull, and at the time when I started, it was the most magnificent thing I'd come into contact with, but it started to dull itself because I needed to keep adding to my experience. And I think that's how we keep finding God on that front porch, because we keep adding to our experience. We don't just sit back on the porch and wait for something to come to us. We have to be willing to go out into the world, to go outside of ourselves, outside of these practices that we know, outside of the community that we know, and be willing to co-create with other people, with other energy, and other opportunities for ourselves. I found this really great quote in my seminary book that I wanted to share. It's by a rabbi, and he said, "When you come to a place that seems outside of God's realm, too coarse for light to enter, and you want to run away, know that there is no place outside of God, and rejoice in your task of uncovering him there." And that's what struck me on the porch, was instead of me feeling like, where has God gone, and staying stuck in that place like God has abandoned us, instead I saw that as an opportunity to seek out God in that place that I wasn't seeing him in. I also think that our creativity lies in our willingness to basically question everything around us. And I know maybe that seems silly, but what I saw in my meditation as I was preparing this was that because how the world manifests individually to all of us, if we aren't willing to question what is around us, again, we will get stuck and mired deeply in, well, this is how it has to be, because I see it this way, and you have to go along with that. And it made me think of, I read somewhere recently that like a rainbow, so like if I'm standing here and Susie is standing here, we can look at the same exact rainbow, but we see different hues of the colors, we see it in a different angle, because we're not standing on the same place in the earth. And that's what we all have to really step into in our political stuff, in our social lives, in our family lives, is that our perspective is unique to us. You guys are sitting down looking up at me. I'm standing here looking down at you. There's a different perspective in the situation. And if we can't step into that, we really can only be stuck in our space of, I'm right. This is the perspective. This one's the best. Because I'm above you somehow. And I think that's the thing we are stuck in right now. That's what society and all the politics and all the stuff is like, you're right, or I'm right and you're wrong. I would never tell you you're right. She can attest to that. I'm just teasing. I'm really working on that. So here's my other Liz Gilbert quote. She said, whatever your life brings to you, respond with creation. If you are celebrating, create. If you are grieving, create. Only create. Always create. Constant creative response. This is the engine of resilience. Man, that's what really struck me, is that engine of resilience. Like, I thought about that with my depression, and I thought that's exactly how I built the resilience, was because I came up with creative new ways to get myself out of the depression. If I just repeated the same things, then I just stayed right where I was. So I thought that was a really important thing for us to look at. And I think that's true for all the feelings of, like, even gratitude, joy. Like, we get stale if we don't seek out new creative outlets. Okay, so I want to ask everyone, describe your spiritual practice in one word. Just shout it out. Mine is evolving.
Peaceful. Intention.
Growth.
Lacking.
Hey, it's good. I like the honesty. What do you got, Norm?
Lucky.
Okay, all right. So one of my seminary friends and I were talking. We did a little spiritual practice together and some healing on some stuff. And at the end of the conversation, we were talking, and she said, "Oh, when are you speaking again?" And I said, "Oh, next Sunday." And she said, "What's the topic?" And I said, "Creativity." And I've been struggling a lot with that at first, like, what? How does that have to do with spirituality? And then I got a lot of answers in that. But she said an interesting thing that really stuck with me too. She said, imagine if you wore the same clothes or the same pair of shoes for 30 days. Like, they would wear down. If you didn't wash things, if you just kept wearing the same shoes over and over and over and over again, they would begin to wear down very quickly, and eventually you would wear a hole in them and they wouldn't be useful to you anymore. And I just was like, that was brilliant. It's brilliant. That's exactly what I'm talking about with our creativity and our spiritual practices. If we just keep doing the same thing over and over again, we're going to wear it down. We will wear our Bible pages thin if that's the only book we read. We will wear down ourselves if all we do is sit and pray and we don't listen. We don't meditate. If we're just asking constantly for God to do something for us, we're never in the place of receiving. So I thought that was a really, really powerful thing. So changing where we are and trying new things is the creativity that helps us move through. So I wanted to give you a few things. So this one I wanted to read. I just am going to read a few practices. So this is from our month on Indigenous practices. So this is called Honor the Ancestors. So this is just a poem that you just read, and then you just meditate with this, and you just hold the space around it. We call upon our ancestors, spirits of the earth we walk upon, spirits of the universe. We have come to a crossroad, to a time when every word matters, to a time when we must reevaluate ourselves and our actions. Our heart is fragile. Our body is shivering in front of the unknown. Our back is heavy with past burdens, burdens we do not know how to be rid of. We ask that you shower us once again with love and compassion. Make peace reign on our heart and soul. Teach us how to see each other with a brand new eye. Help us to appreciate and welcome each other. We need your blessings to move on. We need your strength to make it through this time of turbulence. Ancestors, hold us in your peace and warmth. This one is a really long one, so I'll just read some of the brief. This is the Buddhist loving kindness meditation, and this is a really powerful, powerful meditation, and I can direct any of you who might be interested in finding it. You basically just do a reading where you start with basically the outside world, you go into like your community, and then you go into yourself, and so you basically just keep reading like, may my heart be filled with May my heart be open and filled with loving kindness. May I be free from suffering and fear. May I accept myself and others completely. May I be happy and at peace. And so at the end you get to, may all beings be free of suffering. May all beings dwell in happiness. May all beings everywhere be at peace. And that's just another way to just put yourself in everyone else's shoes, to ask for everyone to have the same unconditional love, compassion, peace, that we all want. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you are a Republican or a Democrat, or you are black or white, or you are gay or straight, or any of these things that we think we stand in opposition of. We all want the same thing. We all want to be accepted, loved, seen, and heard. This is from the Tao. This is modern writings inspired by the Tao. And again, you just can take these verses and meditate with them. This says, each day that passes, the sage discards another useless weight. Finally, all the accumulated burden of a life spent seeking something is gone. In its place is a lightness of being and a clarity of seeing that makes a heaven of each moment. Make it your daily discipline to lay aside one thing, a tiny fear, a simple preoccupation, a useless book, a piece of household clutter, a habit of avoidance, a bit of shame or guilt, a desire that distracts, even a good intention. What will be left is life itself. This one I thought was fascinating. This was from the month of Christianity, which we did in December around Christmas. And I had a hard time with that month because I know we've talked here, from my growing up, it wasn't always difficult to find my way back to some version of Jesus and God in that sense. And I struggled a lot during that month and didn't even find myself willing to participate in the prayers or any of the things that were set out that month. But actually, as seminary finished over the last few months, I had really a awakening. I had to come to Jesus as it is, and I found a new way to Jesus. Speaking of finding a creative path to something that you used to do it in a different way, and so I went back through here, and they had some different versions of the Lord's Prayer, and this one is actually translated directly from the Aramaic. So I thought this was a beautiful thing to share. O birther, father, mother of the cosmos, focus your light within us, make it useful. Create your reign of unity now. Your one desire then acts with ours, as in all light, so in all forms. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us, as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. Don't let surface things delude us, but free us from what holds us back. From you is born all ruling will, the power and the life to do, the song that beautifies all, from age to age it renews. Truly, power to these statements, may they be the ground from which all my actions grow. Amen. The one that surprised me the most was the month for Islam and Sufism. I hadn't had any experience with anything to do with either of those aspects of Islam. And so we had a handful of things that we could do, and one of them was the Sufi body prayer. Now that's a little different than just the traditional Islamic prayer where you just bow and kneel. There's actually words that go along with it. And after the year was completed, we had to reflect in our final thesis on what affected us the most and what practices actually stuck with us and affected us the most. And this was the practice that I had to write about because I don't know what it was, but so I'm just going to read it to you. I won't do the actions because it'll make the microphone get crazy. But so, I step into the embrace of the beloved. You take one step forward and then you match with your second foot. To receive and to give. You cup your hands in front of your heart and then extend outward as a gift of giving. I put behind me all the worldly concerns and egoist thoughts. You bring your hands back, palm facing out, elbows bent. I open my heart, place your hands over your heart center, and offer thanksgiving and praise. You lift your hands up and your arms forward while also looking up. I surrender to you. You bow at the waist, sliding your hands down your thighs to your knees, that I may do your will. You drop to your knees and touch your forehead to the ground. Now and always. You sit back up on your heels, hands resting on your thighs. At one with you. You again touch your forehead to the ground. Then you stand, take the one step back to the original starting place, and you repeat 3 times. I don't know what it is about that, but there's something about being in your heart space, reaching up to the skies, and then bringing yourself all the way back down to the ground. To feel your forehead. I mean, how often do we actually, as adults, put our forehead onto the ground? As kids, I'm sure my brother probably knocked me down. So that was one way I got down there. But, we don't do that. We don't spend time. We sit on the ground sometimes. Sometimes we even take our shoes off and put our feet in the grass. But do we put our head to the ground? Do we feel that energy? So that's something, if any of you guys are interested in, I'd love to share with you afterwards. And the last thing that I wanted to read to you was a daily practice. The funny thing is I had this bookmarked in another book that this originally came from that I was meaning to use here at some point. And then when I was going through my seminary book, I bookmarked it a second time. So I think that meant it was time to share it. This is from a woman named Rachel Naomi Remen. It's the book called My Grandfather's Blessings. It's called Breathing In and Breathing Out. I begin and end each day with a very old ritual that was taught to me by a gentle elderly woman who is a Tibetan nun. Each morning, the first thing after awakening, you take a small empty bowl that you keep for this purpose, and you fill it slowly to the brim from a source of running water. Doubtless the originators of this ritual had in mind some high mountain stream. I use my kitchen faucet, turning it on and letting it run for a while before passing my little bowl through the water to fill it. As the bowl fills, you reflect on the particulars of your life, whatever they are, the people with whom you share your time, your state of health, whatever problems you face, what skills and strengths you have, your disappointments and successes, your worries, your personal gifts, your personal limitations, your home, all your possessions, your losses, your history as a human being. As the bowl fills, you receive your life open-heartedly and unconditionally as your portion. Walking very slowly so as not to spill a drop out of the brimming bowl, you take it to a private place in your home, perhaps a personal altar, and you place it there, dedicating all that it contains to the service of life. Leaving the full bowl in this place, you begin your day. I find that this practice has been profoundly healing to me. The thought that all things can be used equally to befriend life seems to soften the edges of things, to break down the boundaries between one's sorrows and one's joys, one's wounds and one's strengths. They may be of equal value in serving life. Perhaps it is through such consecration that all things will ultimately reveal their true value and meaning. Each evening, the last thing before you go to sleep, you take the bowl outside and empty the water out onto the earth. Then you place the empty bowl upside down in its special place in your home. Turn out your lights and rest. Perhaps this cycle of open-heartedly taking on whatever one has been given, using it all to serve the life around you, then letting it go completely, refers as much to the wisdom of living a lifetime as it does the wisdom of living each day. So I just wanted to say a few more things. One of the important things for us is believing in our faith, in our imagination, and in that creativity with that childlike fervor. Doris will laugh at this because this is my go-to, and I use it at seminary even, but my favorite line in one of the Harry Potter films is the last one, and Harry has died because Dumbledore hits him with the spell, and he goes to King's Cross Station, and he's there, and it looks like heaven, and he's with Dumbledore, who has already died. And Harry says to Dumbledore, didn't I just make all this stuff up in my own head? And Dumbledore just looks at him and is like, of course you made it up in your head. Why does that make it any more or less true? And that has just stuck with me because, through all of my spiritual work, through the shamanic work that we do with people, we do journey work, people are always like, but this is just my imagination. I'm just making this up. Or I prayed and I heard God speak to me. I surely just made that up. Who cares if you made it up? Unless it's telling you to go and murder someone or do something really bad, it's probably okay to just trust that that's how God is speaking through you. And it's okay to let your imagination carry you to these new places. As kids, we have imaginary friends, we have imaginary, we eat imaginary food, we do all these things, and then someone comes along and tells us, stop doing that. Stop using your imagination. Stop believing in these other things. That's where we go wrong. That's where we go wrong with our kids, if we could be more childlike. I mean, how much of the Bible talks about being that child self, about coming to God as a child? I think that's what he means in that, is to use your imagination, use the creative force that is within us to come to God, to come to the divine, to come to the universe, and imagine what a better world can look like for us. If we can't imagine a better world, we will never create anything more than what we see right now. Even my sermon today, this is the first time I haven't used like a printed out version of things, because I heard, she's giving me a thumbs up. I heard, I heard the divine say to me, like, this is a form of creativity also, to be up here and share from your heart and from your space. And if you aren't willing to do that and open yourself up, I mean, anyone can give a lecture and read a book to someone, but if you can't get up and share from your heart, and share from the moment of this liveness, then you can't really call anyone to that newness themselves. So I'm even taking my own advice in that today. So I had a few more things I wanted to read, just a couple of quotes to you that really spoke to me. And there are a couple more months of some of the spirituality. So this one was about the Sabbath. So on the Judaism month, we were asked to participate in the Sabbath. And if you don't know about the Sabbath, you literally have to not use any electronics. You're not supposed to use your car. You're not supposed to really do anything that's not just naturally. And so they even, of course, gave us the break. They're like, try to just not use your phones for the whole day. And that is freaking hard. I mean, you got to put that thing somewhere away, or like hide it, and give it to someone else and say, give this back to me at noon or something, or 2 or 5. So I thought this was a beautiful statement about the Sabbath. It's called Living in the Spirit of the Sabbath. When is enough enough? Many of the world's religions were born in deserts, places with very little food or water. At rest, we may be surprised how even in the driest of places, we are quickly filled to sufficiency by the multitude of gratuitous offerings that arise in a single Sabbath afternoon. That just floored me. I mean, so true. Like pretty much every major world religion is founded in the desert. He's not kidding. And how many times did you see Jesus 40 days in the desert? Moses for 40 years they were stuck out there. And everything was provided for. Why do we think we're anything less than that? Why do we think that God won't provide for us just the same way that he has provided, or she has provided for all the plants and the animals? We got that rain yesterday, which we were all dying for, and I'm sure there were people complaining about it. I'm sure there were people Dudley was like, I can't go on a bike ride today. And I had to tease him, So this is another Buddhist one. This is a walking meditation, which I enjoy doing. You just remember these 4 lines and you just use them. Literally, I would use it like I walk from the living room to the kitchen. And you just say, I have arrived, I am home. In the here and in the now. I am solid, I am free. In the ultimate, I dwell. This is from the Hindu practice. This is a practice of truthfulness called satya. Satya means impeccability in thought, speech, and action. We practice satya through truthful, mindful communication in our speech, writing, our gestures, and our actions. Our truthful communication promotes the welfare of all living beings. And I used that month to just be more mindful of the ways in which I spoke to people, the ways in which I acted in public spaces, in private spaces, wherever I was, to be more mindful of the energy that I was putting out into the universe. This is on mindfulness. Mindfulness is a symbolic bow to each moment, reminding us not to stand outside our lives, but within them. Each time we bow to life, we dissolve separation and discover the peace of oneness. And this was the Bible verse I got, and I'm going to just leave it with you because there's a lot to dive into around this, and maybe this will be something for another Sunday. But it's from 1 John 8:12. Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but he shall find for himself the light of life. So I want to leave you guys with just a question for yourselves. Where and how are you being pushed beyond yourself? And in what is enough? I think that's a question that we need to all ask ourselves. How can we be more in the world? How can we be this outside of these walls? How can we love our neighbors more? How can we be a part of our community more? How can we take these lessons and these things that we preach and say and stand up for on a Sunday morning and be that out in the world more? And I think it's a question for all of us, and I think if we all could answer that question in some new creative way, we would find this world to be a totally different place than what we normally see it as.